Pressure in Sri Lanka has been building for months. Saturday, it boiled over. Protesters and police facing off, with protesters pushing harder. Ignoring tear gas and warning shots, the crowd was able to force its way past police into the home of the president. Thousands entered the building after it was abandoned by security. Some even went for a swim. This man says the luxuries in the home are a waste of national resources and show the government isn't working for the country. Now, in advance of Saturday's protests, the president left his home Friday. The pressure on both he and the prime minister to resign has been growing daily. We must chase them out, this protester says. They must go. It's time to think of the country. The pressure appears to have gotten to both men. The country's parliamentary speaker says the president has agreed to step down next week, and the prime minister's office Saturday issued a statement saying he's willing to step down to make way for an all-party government to take over.
Today, the people show the nation and the international community the power of the people.
Sri Lankans are suffering. There are shortages of food, fuel, and medicine, and prices are skyrocketing.
And bring down the inflation.
The head of the central bank said this week inflation was up more than 55% since last year and predicted it could hit 70%. There's also no relief coming. The president said this week inflation could be around until the end of next year. Critics blame corruption and mismanagement compounded by the pandemic. The situation in the country, one critic says, isn't a cautionary tale. It's a horror story. It's also still being written. Overnight, the prime minister's residence was set on fire. Mike Armstrong.
Show scenes of chaos inside President Rajapaksa's seafront residence in Colombo. Hundreds of protesters got inside the building, with more seen making use of the swimming pool out the back. Now, the president wasn't at home as all this unfolded. He actually left on Friday ahead of today's planned demonstration as a precaution. We're told police did fire warning shots into the air to try and stop the crowds from getting into his home, but it did little to deter the protesters, who've also taken over the president's seafront offices, Sri Lanka's finance ministry, and the official residence of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who has now agreed to resign after only being in the position since May. He was actually brought in to try and help sort out Sri Lanka's economic crisis, the driving factor for today's big demonstration. But as I say, he has now announced his resignation. I should add, the authorities did try to stop this particular demonstration from taking place. Last night, they imposed a curfew, but it was lifted after civil society groups and opposition politicians objected to it. But certainly questions will be asked today about the security arrangements in place at the president's home, how hundreds of protesters somehow managed to bypass all of that and get inside the building. The cause of all this unrest is Sri Lanka's worsening economic crisis. Inflation is currently at 55%. Fuel, medicines and fuel are in short supply. It is heaping unbelievable hardship on the cash-strapped population, and many blame the Rajapaksa family, which has been in power for years, for mismanaging the economy and for borrowing heavily from China. And we have seen several protests this year as a result, but this weekend's was the largest so far, with things, as we've seen, really getting out of hand very quickly indeed. Dominic Velitis, CBC News, London.